The planet Kalora 7 had once been a peaceful trade station, home to the graceful and intelligent alien race called the Virilians. Now it was silent. Cold winds blew over its glass domes, and broken lights flickered in the distance like ghosts of a forgotten civilization. Eli Vance, a 34-year-old human engineer, stepped out of his shuttle with caution. His boots crunched against cracked floor tiles as he scanned the area with his wrist scanner. The air was breathable, but heavy with dust and burnt metal. His team had been sent to investigate the distress signals and recover any remaining technology. No one expected survivors. Eli moved deeper into the ruined structure. Wires hung from the ceiling. Doors creaked. His scanner beeped, a faint life sign, behind a sealed door. He forced the panel open and stepped inside a small chamber. There, huddled in the corner, was a figure, thin, trembling, wrapped in a silver cloak torn at the edges. It was a Virilian female, her lavender skin dull and marked with faint bruises. Her eyes, large and blue like glowing oceans, locked onto him in fear. Eli raised his hand slowly. "Hey, I'm not here to hurt you." The alien woman didn't answer. She only stared at him, breathing fast. Her hands clutched her cloak tightly, as if expecting pain. Eli knelt and put his scanner away. "You're safe now," he said gently. "My name is Eli. I'm from Earth. Can you speak?" The woman blinked slowly. Then, in a cracked, quiet voice, she said one word: "Help." Eli brought her aboard the Odyssey Hope, the human ship orbiting Kalora 7. The crew was shocked. Most of them believed the Virilians had either escaped or perished in the attack led by a rival species weeks ago. Some wanted to follow protocol, report the alien, keep her in quarantine, and move on. But Eli insisted she be given care. "I found her," he said firmly. "She's not a threat. She's scared. We don't leave people behind, no matter the species." Captain Reyes agreed reluctantly but warned, "She's your responsibility, Eli. Watch her. Keep the peace." Eli guided her to the medical bay, where she received fluids and basic treatment. The alien woman didn't speak much, but her eyes always followed Eli, as if he was the only anchor she had left. Over the next 2 days, Eli visited her regularly. He brought soft food, blankets, and tried teaching her simple English words. She learned quickly. He discovered her name was Sarai, and that she had been hiding underground since the attack. Her family was gone. She had survived on stale water and fear. One evening, as Eli entered her room with a warm drink, he noticed she had arranged the pillows neatly. She stood when he entered, her posture straight but uncertain. "I did this for you," she said in broken English. Eli smiled. "That's kind. But you don't have to do anything. You're safe now." Sarai tilted her head, confused. "I must do something. I must have purpose." "You need rest," Eli said. "Healing is your purpose for now." Sarai walked closer. She stood only a little shorter than Eli, her features delicate, her voice soft. "Tell me what to do, human," she whispered. "I want to be yours." Eli blinked, surprised. "Sarai, you don't belong to anyone. You're not mine. You're free." She looked down, struggling to understand. "Virilian females are given, traded, promised. That is what I was told." He stepped forward and gently lifted her chin so she could see his eyes. "That's not how we do things. At least, not the right way. On my world, people choose who they belong with, not who they belong to." Sarai's eyes filled with a mix of confusion and something else: hope. Later that night, Eli sat in the ship's observation bay, watching the stars. Sarai joined him quietly, sitting beside him. Neither spoke for a long time. "I don't know where to go," she finally said. "My people are gone. My place is gone." "You can stay here," Eli replied, "as long as you want." She turned her head to him. "And if I stay, will you tell me more of your people, of your ways?" He nodded. "Yes. As much as you want to know. Her hand touched the edge of his, not grabbing, not holding, just touching, carefully, gently. Then I will learn, she whispered, because you looked at me, like I was not broken. As the stars shimmered outside the window, two distant lives sat side by side, slowly building something fragile but strong, trust. And though the galaxy around them still trembled with danger, something new had begun. Something human. Over the following weeks, Sarai adapted to life aboard the Odyssey Hope. The ship was a bustling place. Engineers worked long hours, communications officers monitored space channels, and the crew maintained the delicate balance of their mission. But all that activity seemed distant to Sarai, who still struggled to understand the alien world of humans. Their ways, their emotions, their mannerisms, all of it was new, and much of it was confusing. Eli, however, remained by her side, patiently guiding her through the unfamiliarity. She quickly learned that the humans were different from her own people. While Varillians were a proud, quiet species, the humans were open, expressive, and often exuberantly emotional. Sarai was both fascinated and overwhelmed. One afternoon, as Eli worked alongside a few other engineers in the ship's maintenance bay, Sarai stood at the doorway, observing the humans around her. Her lavender skin still held a hint of the dirt and dust from the wreckage of her planet, but she had cleaned herself up, trying to blend in. "Can I help?" she asked Eli, her voice hesitant. She was still unsure of her place. Eli looked over his shoulder and smiled. "You don't have to help if you don't want to, Sarai. You've been through a lot. You should take it easy." But Sarai shook her head. "I need to do something. You said I could choose my purpose. I choose to help." Eli paused, setting his tool down. He could see that the words he'd said to her about freedom and choice had begun to resonate. She wasn't just recovering from the physical wounds anymore. She was recovering from a much deeper scar, the loss of her people and her identity. Helping gave her a sense of control over her life again. "You've got a lot to learn," Eli said with a chuckle. "But if you want to help, I could use an extra pair of hands." Sarai smiled, grateful. She stepped into the bay, where she was quickly taught basic tasks, checking the energy converters, monitoring fuel levels, and recalibrating the environmental control systems. The work was simple but necessary. As she worked alongside the humans, she began to feel something she hadn't felt in days: purpose. As the days turned into weeks, Sarai's understanding of human culture grew. She learned not only how to repair the ship's systems, but also how to communicate better with the crew. She began to ask questions about human emotions, about their history, and about their hopes for the future. One evening, while the ship was docked at a nearby space station for supplies, Sarai found herself standing alone in the ship's observation deck. She gazed out into the endless stars, her mind adrift. The emptiness of space mirrored the emptiness she had felt since the fall of her people. She had no home left, no family, no purpose, until now. Eli found her there, just as he had many times before. This time, though, he said nothing at first. He simply stood beside her, both of them looking out at the stars. "You miss your people," Eli said softly, breaking the silence. Sarai nodded. "I miss my planet. I miss the way things were. But I don't know where I belong now. I don't know who I am." Eli turned to her, his gaze gentle. "You belong here. You're part of the crew now, and your purpose doesn't have to be tied to a place. It's what you make of it." Sarai looked at him, searching his face for the truth in his words. She still wasn't sure what it meant to belong to humans, whether it was out of kindness, pity, or something deeper. But she could see in Eli's eyes that he believed in her, and that belief was something she hadn't felt in a long time. "Tell me more about your people," she said, her voice small. "Tell me about what it's like to belong." Eli hesitated for a moment. It was clear to him that Sarai was trying to understand something far bigger than herself, something beyond survival, beyond rebuilding. She was searching for a sense of connection, for something to fill the void left by the destruction of her people. "Well," he began, his voice thoughtful, Humans are complicated. We fight. We love. We argue. We make mistakes. But we also forgive. We work together, even when things are hard. It's not always easy, but the strength of human spirit is in our ability to choose each other, even when we don't have to. Sarai listened intently. That sounds nice. I think I could learn to like that. As the days passed, Sarai became more integrated into the ship's operations. She helped the engineers with their tasks, learned more about human history, and even began to interact more openly with the rest of the crew. Yet, no matter how much progress she made, there was still an underlying sense of uncertainty in her heart. She was still learning what it meant to be human, still questioning her own identity and place in the universe. One evening, as the crew gathered in the mess hall for dinner, Sarai sat at a corner table, carefully studying the others. She noticed how they laughed together, shared stories, and occasionally poked fun at each other. The atmosphere was warm, familial, even if they didn't always agree on everything. Ela joined her at the table, sitting down with a tray of food. "You getting used to all this?" he asked, his tone casual but kind. Sarai looked up at him, then back at the crew, still deep in conversation. "I think so. But sometimes I wonder if I'll ever really understand all of it." "You will," Eli assured her. "It just takes time. And you don't have to understand everything to belong." She looked at him, and for the first time since her arrival aboard the ship, she felt a small flicker of something she hadn't dared to hope for. Hope. A tiny spark of belonging. As the crew laughed and shared stories around them, Sarai let herself smile, just a little. In the quiet of space, where nothing but the stars and the hum of the ship surrounded them, Sarai was starting to understand something that her people had never truly taught her. That sometimes, being with others is all it takes to feel like you belong. The ship's corridors had become a little more familiar to Sarai with each passing day. She had learned to navigate the various rooms, from the observation deck to the engine room. It was a quiet life, but it was beginning to feel like home. She'd stopped feeling like a stranger, though the memories of her people, their voices, their laughter, still echoed faintly in her mind. Eli had helped her understand human technology, the way the ship's systems worked, and even some basic human customs. But it wasn't just the mechanics of the ship that had changed for her. The people aboard the Odyssey Hope, the humans, had started to feel less like a foreign species and more like family. Their laughter, their gestures, even their way of speaking, began to make sense in a way she hadn't imagined before. One afternoon, Eli found her in the ship's medical bay, sitting on a chair in front of a large screen. She was scrolling through a digital dictionary, reading each word carefully, her fingers brushing against the screen. It wasn't the first time she'd been looking for new words, but today she seemed focused. "Found any interesting words?" Eli asked as he stepped in, wiping his hands on a cloth. Sarai looked up, her lavender eyes soft with curiosity. "Many," she said, "but this one, belonging, I do not understand it fully. What does it mean to belong?" Eli sat down beside her, his gaze softening. "To belong means to feel a part of something. It's like being accepted, to not be alone. It's a feeling of connection." Sarai nodded slowly, her brow furrowing. I think I'd want to belong, Eli, but I don't know how to belong. I don't know where I fit." Eli placed a hand on her shoulder, a gesture of comfort that surprised Sarai. It was a simple act, but it carried a warmth that made her heart flutter in a way she wasn't sure how to explain. "You belong here, with us, with me." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence between them wasn't uncomfortable, though. It was a quiet understanding that Sarai didn't fully comprehend yet, but she felt it, deep in her chest, like a small seed growing. Something that had been missing for so long, finally taking root. As the days went on, Sarai found herself more comfortable among the crew. She helped Eli with the ship's systems, learning how to fix and repair broken parts, much like the engineers back home used to do. She even started offering her own suggestions, her voice no longer hesitant but clear and confident. However, it wasn't just her work that had changed. Sarai had started to feel the stirrings of something deeper. As she spent time with Eli, their conversations drifted from the technical and practical to something more personal. She asked about his life, his memories, his home, his hopes, and he, in turn, shared his stories with her. One evening, as the ship drifted silently through the stars, they sat together in the observation deck, sipping warm tea. The stars outside the window glimmered, 1,000 points of light illuminating the vast emptiness of space. "Eli," Sarai said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper, "do you ever think about what happens after all this? After we finish our mission?" Eli looked at her, a small smile forming on his lips. "I think about it sometimes. About how big the universe is, and how small we are in comparison. But I also think about how the people we meet, the connections we make, that's what matters most." Sarai nodded, her gaze shifting toward the stars. "I never understood that. I was raised to think of duty and survival, to live for my people, for the greater good of the Virilian kind. But now," she paused, struggling to put her feelings into words. "Now I wonder if maybe there's more than just survival. Maybe there's more than just living for others. Maybe there's living for yourself too." Eli watched her, sensing the depth of the thought she had just shared. "There is," he said softly. "Living for yourself, for your own happiness, is something that matters just as much. It's not selfish to want a life you can call your own." For the first time, Sarai let herself smile. The smile wasn't just out of politeness, it was real. It was the first genuine smile she had given in a long time. Over the following weeks, Eli began to notice subtle changes in Sarai. She no longer shied away from physical contact. She would brush her hand lightly against his as they passed each other in the hallways, and there was no longer any hesitation when she spoke to him. She had started to speak more openly, with more confidence, and though she still had much to learn about human customs, her curiosity seemed endless. One night, after a long day of repairs, they found themselves sitting in the mess hall, the soft chatter of the crew around them. Sarai sat a little closer to Eli than she normally did, her hand resting gently on the table. "You're not like them, are you?" she asked quietly, her eyes fixed on the table in front of her. "The other humans." Eli raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" You don't just see me as an alien. You see me as a person. And you don't make me feel like I'm something less." Eli reached over, placing his hand on hers. "That's because you are a person, Sarai, just like anyone else, and you don't have to be like anyone else to matter." Sarai looked up at him, her expression soft. "Thank you, Eli, for everything." Eli's heart skipped a beat. He didn't know how to explain the feeling in his chest, the deep connection he felt with her. It wasn't just a bond of survival or companionship. It was something deeper, something that neither of them fully understood yet, but it was real. "You're welcome," he replied simply. And in that quiet moment, as they sat side by side, surrounded by the laughter of the crew, Sarai realized something. She had found a place where she belonged. Not because of duty or expectation, but because of love. Soft, simple, and true. The days aboard the Odyssey Hope had grown quieter, more predictable. For the first time in months, Sarai began to feel that the constant ache in her chest, the emptiness that had followed her since the destruction of her home, was finally beginning to ease. She had found a new rhythm in her life, one that revolved around helping the crew, learning more about humanity, and finding the simple joy of being understood. However, despite the peace she was beginning to feel, the universe around her was far from still. Tensions within the ship's crew began to rise. The humans on board were divided in their opinions about her presence. Some were accepting, but others were uneasy. There were whispers in the hallways, murmurs in the mess hall. Some of the crew questioned the wisdom of bringing an alien aboard a human ship, especially one with ties to a species considered enemies. One afternoon, as Sarai and Eli were working together in the engine bay, The topic of her presence came up. Eli was trying to explain a new system upgrade, but Sarai's focus seemed distant. She kept glancing at the door, where two of the crew members were talking in low voices. They didn't try to hide their disapproval. "I heard that alien's been spending more time with Vance than with the rest of us," one of them muttered. The other responded, "I don't trust her. She's from the Virillian system. What if she's a spy? She could be dangerous." Sarai's hand faltered in midair. The wrench she had been holding dropped to the floor with a soft clink. Eli didn't hear it. He was too busy concentrating on the system, but Sarai's face tightened. The words, though softly spoken, felt like a punch to her chest. She had been trying so hard to belong, to prove that she was not a threat, but the whispers in the air made it feel like it was all for nothing. Eli finally noticed the silence and turned to see Sarai standing still, staring at the ground. "Sarai," he asked gently, "is everything okay?" She didn't respond right away, her hand still resting where it had dropped the wrench. Her mind was a whirlwind. The thought that someone on this ship, someone she had begun to consider a friend, might see her as an enemy was almost unbearable. "They don't trust me, do they?" she finally asked, her voice soft but full of hurt. Eli's heart sank. He stepped closer to her, his expression sincere. "No, they don't all trust you. But you know what? It's not about you. It's about their own fear. They don't understand your people, and they're scared. But I'm not like them," Sarai said, her voice trembling. "I never was. I just want to belong. I want to be part of this, part of your world." Eli looked at her, the weight of her words heavy in the air. He gently placed a hand on her arm. I know, but trust is earned. And sometimes it takes time. Don't let it get to you, okay? Not everyone on this ship is afraid of you." Sarai nodded, though the pain in her chest remained. She had grown so much since coming aboard the Odyssey Hope. She had learned to trust, to open up, to hope. But now she was faced with the harsh reality that not all humans were ready to accept her, no matter how hard she tried. That night, Sarai found herself in the observation deck again. The stars stretched out before her, endless and cold. It felt like the universe itself was indifferent to her presence, as if she didn't matter. The people around her, Eli, the crew, might have been warm and accepting, but there were still those who saw her as nothing more than a reminder of the conflict that had nearly destroyed her kind. Eli had given her space after their conversation. He knew she needed time to think, but he had also promised her one thing. He would stand by her. That promise was enough to keep her from sinking into despair. She wasn't alone, not anymore. As the hours passed, Sarai sat in the quiet, her thoughts a tangled mess. She wanted to prove herself to the crew, to show them that she was not just a survivor, but someone who could contribute, someone who could be trusted. But how could she do that when her very existence reminded them of war? Just then, she heard the soft sound of footsteps approaching. Eli entered the room and paused when he saw her. "I thought I'd find you here," he said quietly, stepping closer. Sarai didn't look at him right away. She stared out the window at the stars, her thoughts swirling. Do they hate me, Eli?" she asked, her voice thick with emotion. Eli sat beside her, his presence a steadying force. "They don't hate you. They're just scared. It's fear, Sarai. It's always fear, and fear can make people say things they don't mean. But I don't know how to change that," she admitted, the vulnerability in her voice raw. "I can't erase what's happened. I can't erase what my people did." Eli reached out and placed a hand over hers. "You don't have to. What matters is what you choose to do now. What matters is what you show them." Sarai turned to him, her eyes filled with uncertainty. "But how can I show them, Eli? How can I show them that I'm not their enemy?" Eli smiled softly. "By being you, by showing them who you are. The rest will follow. Trust me, Sarai. I believe in you." For the first time since the attack on her people, Sarai felt a spark of something she hadn't thought possible. Hope. Eli was right. She couldn't change her past, but she could change how she moved forward. She squeezed his hand gently, a small but significant gesture. "Thank you." Eli nodded. "Anytime, Sarai." As they sat together, the stars outside shining brightly in the vastness of space, Sarai realized something important. It wasn't just her alone that needed to heal, it was the entire crew. And maybe, just maybe, she could help them do that too. The following weeks aboard the Odyssey Hope passed quietly, but the atmosphere had shifted. While some crew members were still wary of Sarai, others had begun to soften. Slowly, but surely, the walls between her and the humans on the ship started to crumble. She worked alongside them, learning new skills, fixing machinery, and even helping with navigation. She had learned a lot about human technology, but more importantly, she had learned about humanity itself. One evening, after a long day of work, Eli and Sarai sat together in the mess hall, enjoying a rare moment of peace. The crew was scattered around the room, laughing and eating, but Sarai's eyes were fixed on the table in front of her. She had been deep in thought lately. Something had been pulling at her, a question she had been afraid to ask. "Eli," she began, her voice soft, as if testing the waters. He turned his head toward her, sensing the change in her tone. "What's on your mind?" "I've been thinking about my people." "The Virilians," Sarai said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Before all of this happened, we had a very different life. We were diplomats, traders, explorers. We had peace. My father was a leader, one of the most respected. I used to think that I was meant to follow in his footsteps." Eli leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. "And now?" Sarai's gaze drifted toward the stars outside the window, her eyes distant. "Now, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. I've been so lost, Eli. For so long, I thought my identity was tied to my people, to their mission, their cause. But when everything fell apart, I was left with nothing but myself. I didn't know who I was anymore." Eli's voice was gentle as he spoke. "You don't have to be what others expect you to be, Sarai. You're not just your people or your past. You're yourself, and that's more than enough." Sarai turned to look at him, her eyes searching. "But what if? What if I'm not enough? What if I can't live up to the person I was supposed to be?" Eli reached across the table and placed his hand on hers. "You are enough, more than enough. What you've gone through, what you've survived, it doesn't take away who you are. It's just part of your story. You get to decide how that story ends." For a long moment, Sarai was silent, contemplating his words. The weight in her chest lightened just a little, but the question still lingered. Could she truly be free of her past? Could she find a new purpose, a new path? The next day, the ship received a message, a distress signal from a nearby space station. The transmission was garbled, but it was clear enough that the station was in trouble. The crew, as always, readied the ship for the mission. They weren't sure what had caused the distress signal, but they couldn't ignore it. As Eli and Sarai prepared for the journey, Eli couldn't help but notice the change in her. Sarai moved with a renewed sense of purpose, a determination in her step. She was no longer the frightened, unsure woman who had boarded the Odyssey Hope months ago. She was stronger now, not just in the way she worked, but in the way she carried herself. "You ready?" Eli asked as they walked toward the docking bay. Sarai nodded, her expression serious but calm. "I'm ready. I think I know what I need to do now." Eli studied her for a moment, sensing a quiet confidence in her that hadn't been there before. "What's that?" Sarai gave him a small smile, her eyes shining with something new, a spark of hope. "I need to help. I don't need to be a leader. I don't need to live up to someone else's expectations. But I can contribute. I can make a difference, even if it's just in small ways." When they arrived at the space station, they discovered that it had been attacked. The station's systems were failing, and several crew members were missing. Sarai and Ela joined the rescue team, working quickly to secure the area and stabilize the station's systems. Sarai moved efficiently, directing the crew to specific tasks, her technical expertise proving invaluable. As they worked, Sarai felt a sense of fulfillment that she hadn't felt before. She was no longer trying to prove herself. She wasn't trying to be someone else. She was simply doing what she knew how to do, helping. And in that moment, she realized something important. She didn't have to be tied to her past or her people's expectations. Her purpose, her meaning, came from within. After the mission was completed, the Odyssey Hope returned to its usual course. The crew was in high spirits, proud of their success. As they celebrated, Sarai and Ela found themselves back in the observation deck, the stars once again stretching endlessly before them. "I did it," Sarai said quietly, her voice filled with a sense of peace. "I helped." Eli smiled, his gaze warm. "You did. You're a part of this crew now. And you've earned your place here." Sarai turned to look at him, her expression serious. "I've been thinking, Eli, about what you said, about not needing to be someone else, about finding my own purpose. I think I've found it." Eli raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" Sarai's gaze softened as she looked at him, her voice steady. "I found that I don't need to live up to the expectations of others. I just need to be me. And I want to keep helping. I want to keep learning, growing, and finding my place in this universe." Eli smiled, his heart swelling with pride. "I'm glad you're here, Sarai. And I'm glad you found your purpose." For the first time since the fall of her people, Sarai felt whole. She had stopped searching for a path that wasn't hers. Instead, she had found her own way, one step at a time. And with Eli by her side, she knew she wasn't alone. The Odyssey Hope drifted through the cold expanse of space, its engines humming steadily as the crew carried out their usual duties. Sarai had become an integral part of the team, her skills and contributions invaluable. But despite the calm on board, something far greater was unfolding in the galaxy. A storm was brewing at the edges of known space, one that threatened to engulf everything in its path. The situation had started with a series of strange communications, unsettling, cryptic messages from an unknown faction. Eli and the crew had been monitoring the transmissions, trying to piece together what was happening. It wasn't long before they realized that the Virillian warship fleet, long believed to have been destroyed, was regathering near Orion's edge, a vast and uncharted section of space. Sarai had learned of her people's fleet and their call to arms. She had long since reconciled with her past, accepting the truth that she could not change what had happened. But now, her people's fate hung in the balance once again. The warship fleet, under new leadership, threatened to destabilize the fragile peace between their species and the humans. Eli stood in the observation deck, his arms crossed, staring out at the black void. He had always known there was something more to this mission than just exploration, but he hadn't anticipated this. The crew had received orders to intervene if the Virillian fleet advanced. The situation was critical, and the choice was no longer about survival. It was about peace, and Sarai knew this better than anyone. "Are you ready?" Eli's voice broke the silence. Sarai had entered quietly, standing beside him. She had changed since the day they first met. The uncertainty, the fear, those things were no longer visible in her eyes. Now, they held a quiet strength. "I don't know if I'm ready," Sarai admitted, her voice soft yet firm. "But I know what's at stake. If I don't speak up now, my people may choose war again." Eli turned to look at her, his eyes filled with understanding. "You're not alone in this, Sarai. We'll face it together, all of us." Sarai smiled faintly, grateful for his support, but deep inside, a gnawing fear remained. What if her efforts were not enough? What if the future of both her species and humanity depended on a decision that neither side was ready to make? The crew gathered in the briefing room, the air thick with tension. Captain Rice had called a meeting to discuss their course of action. The Virillian fleet was now within striking distance, and there was no time left to waste. We don't know exactly what they want. Captain Rice began, her voice steady. But we do know that if they continue their advance, it will lead to a full-scale conflict. Our mission is to prevent that from happening by any means necessary. Eli exchanged a glance with Sarai. She had told them everything she knew about the Virilians, how they had once been a peaceful species, how they had been torn apart by internal struggles and betrayal. But now, Sarai feared that the scars of the past had run too deep. Would they be able to stop the war, or was it already too late? Captain Rice looked to Sarai, her gaze searching. Sarai, you know your people better than anyone. What should we expect from them? Sarai hesitated before speaking, her thoughts turning inward. They're not all the same. Some will want peace. Others will see this as their last chance for revenge. If I reach them, I can stop them. But if I fail... Eli's hand rested on her shoulder, a quiet gesture of reassurance. You won't fail. You've already brought change, just by being here. Sarai nodded, grateful for his words. But deep inside, she was unsure. The warships, once a symbol of her people's power, now felt like a barrier between her and the future she wanted. Could she truly bridge the divide between the Virilian fleet and the humans? She wasn't sure. But one thing was certain, she would try. The Odyssey Hope arrived at Orion's edge, its crew bracing for what lay ahead. Sarai stood with Eli on the bridge, watching as the massive, dark silhouette of the Virilian fleet appeared in the distance. The warships were imposing, their sleek alien designs menacing against the backdrop of space. We're getting their signal, the communications officer said, turning to Captain Reyes. It's encrypted, but it's definitely from them. Sarai stepped forward, taking a deep breath. I can speak to them. I'll try to reach their leader. Captain Reyes nodded. You have one chance, Sarai. Make it count. Sarai turned to Eli, her expression resolute. If I don't return. Eli placed a hand on her arm. You will. You're not alone in this, Sarai. No matter what happens, you've already changed everything. With a final, reassuring look at Eli, Sarai took her place at the communications console. The ship's transmission system hummed to life as she initiated contact with the Virilian fleet. This is Sarai, daughter of the Virilian Council. She spoke firmly into the mic, her voice calm but filled with authority. I speak to you not as an enemy, but as one of your own. I beg you to listen. The path you are on leads only to destruction. We have a choice. We can build a future together, or we can let the past consume us all. A long silence followed. The crew waited, their breaths held. Then, the Virilian leader's voice crackled through the comms, sharp and full of disdain. Sarai, the voice said, you abandoned us. You betrayed us. Your place is no longer here. Sarai's heart skipped a beat, but she stood her ground. I did not abandon you. I left because I believed in peace. You do not have to follow the path of revenge. You do not have to make the same mistakes. There was a pause, and then the voice softened, just slightly. Perhaps there is a way to end this, but it will require trust, and it will require time. Sarai's eyes closed for a moment. It was a breakthrough, a crack in the wall that had separated her people from the rest of the universe. Trust can be built. It begins with one step. Let that step be now. The transmission cut off, and for a long moment, the room was silent. The crew watched Sarai, unsure of what would happen next. But there was something in her eyes, a flicker of hope. Perhaps this was the beginning of something new. Perhaps it was not too late to change the future. The Odyssey Hope sat quietly at the edge of Orion's edge. The vastness of space stretching endlessly in every direction. The Virilian fleet loomed nearby, dark and foreboding. But for the first time in weeks, Sarai felt a shift, a change in the air. The communication she had sent had done something that she hadn't expected. It had created a crack in the hardened wall of hostility between her people and the humans. For the first time since her arrival aboard the Odyssey Hope, Sarai no longer felt like an outsider. Her past, once a heavy burden that she couldn't escape, now seemed like just one chapter in a much larger story. And the future, though uncertain, was hers to shape. The crew had been on edge since the communication with the Virillian fleet, uncertain whether the peace Sarai had called for would actually hold. Yet there was something in the way the ship's crew now looked at her, a respect, an understanding, that hadn't been there before. They had all been witnesses to the transformation she had undergone. She wasn't just a survivor anymore. She was a bridge, a path forward for her people and for humanity. The quiet was broken by a message from the Virillian fleet. The leader of the fleet had agreed to meet with Sarai. It wasn't the full reconciliation she had hoped for, but it was a start. She would have to face her people, the ones who still saw her as a traitor. It wasn't going to be easy. But this time, she felt ready. The crew gathered on the bridge, their faces a mixture of apprehension and hope. Eli stood beside Sarai, his presence a steadying force. He had promised her that no matter what happened, he would be there. And he meant it. "I'm ready," Sarai said softly, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "I've come this far. I can't turn back now." Eli gave her a reassuring smile. "You've always been ready. You've just had to see it for yourself." The Virillian warship opened its communication channel, and Sarai's heart beat a little faster as she saw the face of the fleet's leader on the screen. The leader's gaze was sharp, his expression hard, yet there was something behind his eyes, something that gave Sarai hope. "Sarai," the Virillian leader said, his voice cold but not hostile. "You've broken the laws of our people. You've abandoned us in our darkest hour." Sarai stood tall, her voice clear and unwavering. "I didn't abandon you," she replied. "I left because I believed in a better future, a future where we don't have to destroy each other, where we can coexist, where we can rebuild together." The leader's eyes narrowed. "And you think that is possible? After everything that has happened, your people were wiped out, ours nearly destroyed by betrayal. What makes you believe peace is even possible?" Sarai's gaze softened. She knew that the wounds of her people ran deep, but she also knew that hatred could not be the answer. "Because I believe in the strength of the heart, not the sword. I've seen humans who have lost so much, yet still choose to reach out and help others. I've seen humans who are willing to fight for peace, not war. I believe we can be better than our past." For a long moment, the Virillian leader remained silent. Sarai's heart raced, unsure if her words would be enough. Then he spoke, his voice softer this time. "You are a fool, Sarai," he said, "but perhaps there is something in your foolishness worth considering." Sarai's heart skipped a beat. This was the chance she had been waiting for, a chance to show her people that peace was not just a dream, but something they could build together. The leader continued, "We will not abandon our fleet, but we will stand down. We will cease our advance. For now, we will listen to you, Sarai. We will see if your words hold true." Sarai's breath caught in her chest. It wasn't an outright victory, but it was a start, a fragile peace, but a peace nonetheless. As the transmission ended, Eli stepped forward, his smile wide and full of pride. "You did it. You showed them that there's another way." Sarai turned to him, her expression filled with gratitude. "I couldn't have done it without you, Eli. You believed in me when I didn't believe in myself." Eli placed his hand on her shoulder. "You're stronger than you know, Sarai. You've always been strong. You just needed to find your way." In the days that followed, the Odyssey Hope remained at the edge of Orion's edge, waiting for a response from the Virillian fleet. The atmosphere aboard the ship had changed. It was no longer filled with the heavy tension of conflict. Instead, there was a tentative hope that peace could be built, one small step at a time. One evening, after the crew had finished their duties, Sarai and Eli stood on the observation deck, looking out at the stars. The darkness of space seemed endless, but for the first time in a long time, Sarai didn't feel lost in it. I think I've found my place," Sarai said, her voice quiet but confident. Eli turned to look at her. "What do you mean?" Sarai smiled softly, her gaze turning toward him. "I'm not the daughter of a Virilian leader anymore. I'm not just someone from the past. I'm Sarai, someone who can choose her own future, someone who can help build it, alongside humans and Virilians. And maybe, just maybe, we can all find a way to be something more." Eli's heart swelled as he looked at her. There was no doubt in his mind that Sarai had already begun to change the future, not just for her people, but for the universe itself. "You're right," he said, his voice filled with emotion. "You are yours, Sarai, and I am mine. And together, we can build a future where we choose peace." Sarai took a deep breath, feeling the weight of those words settle in her chest. "And you are mine too. We've both chosen each other." As they stood there, side by side, with the stars shining brightly around them, Sarai knew that no matter what the future held, she was no longer alone. She had found her place. She had found her home. And in Eli's presence, she knew she had found something even more precious, something worth fighting for.